Alright, the goal of this video is to go over the basics of portrait editing. So we have here an image, and the first thing we want to do is duplicate the original so that we can have a reference to what the original was like. So to duplicate a layer, that's Control-J, or you could right-click or two-finger tap the layer and then choose Duplicate Layer. Now we're going to be working on that duplicate, and the first thing we're going to focus on, there's a set of tools that's found on the left hand side. If you click and hold, the first tool we're going to be working with is the spot healing brush, but you can see there's a whole list of tools here that we will be going over. Starting with this tool here, we're going to zoom in. So this tool is used mainly to remove blemishes. So most of them are going to be small dots. Think of a blemish as something that is not permanent, something that's temporary. You wake up, you have a pimple somewhere, or a scratch that you got from an injury, something like that that is not permanent, and you want to just get rid of it. So the simple way this tool is used is usually just to point and click over something that you want to remove and blend in with the surrounding. And that's exactly the way the tool works. You click on an area and it examines the surrounding, in this case skin tones, and replaces where you click with the pattern that is surrounding. So it intelligently replaces it. So as you scroll around, go ahead and take few times, go ahead and find a few blemishes or things that you think might be blemishes. Go ahead and click and see how the tool works. This is a brush tool, so you do have a couple of settings. At the top, you'll see, of course, the size and the hardness. I actually probably should decrease the hardness because you do not want to have a distinct circular pattern if you click somewhere. So this will just kind of help to blend in the edge. You could already see when I was using it, the edge is not really visible, but on the off chance it would be, I'm just going to make it a little bit softer. Alright, the other way you could use this tool is to paint with it. So a lot of times you could use that to remove some hair wisps. Like over here we could paint some things out. Again, this is trying to intelligently replace pixels wherever you click or paint with surrounding patterns. So sometimes it doesn't always get it correct. This is a very blurred area on this image, so it's not going to really be a visible effect. Maybe some here on the top. So again, I just want you to practice using the tool so you can get a handle on how the tool behaves and how it could be useful. Another way you could use this is to remove wrinkles. So again, as you're editing a portrait, you want to make sure that you're not going to be doing anything that's offensive to the person. So this would be something that you would want to, get permission. You want to do you want to look younger? And there's nothing wrong with wrinkles as you age. It's just part of nature. So as you can see, as I'm scrolling or painting over these wrinkles, it's a little bit wonky. I could use a larger brush to go over them, but the result will probably be very similar because we're really drastically altering a person's appearance. So it's doing its best. It's trying to choose skin tones that would work in the area. But I'm actually going to undo what I just did there. And we're going to do this with the next tool. So the next tool found in the same spot is the healing brush tool. And this is similar in that we're trying to replace pixels, but with this tool you have to select skin tones yourself. So if you click and try to use this tool, you'll get a warning that you need to select the clone source. So this one is targeting. The first step, you have to target. So we're going to hold the Alt key down, and you can see your cursor changes to a crosshair. And this, what you want to do is target an area of a skin tone that you'll want to use. So I'm going to target this brighter area of the cheek, and I'm going to start from the left hand side because I typically paint from left to right. So I'm going to click here on the left part of the cheek. So holding the Alt key, and then I'm going to click. Now you can see that I've grabbed that skin tone, and now as I click to place, my crosshair is going to appear on the cheek and follow my brush stroke along. That's showing me as I move, the targeted area also moves. So you have to be aware of that. I may travel too far off of the cheek, into the ear or the hair, and then it's going to mess stuff up over here. So this is a more controlled tool where you have control over what skin tones you're using. So you just need to be mindful of where your targeted area is. Now I like to do like a drastic example of this just to show you how this tool works. I'm going to go ahead and target the corner of the eye there, and I'm going to just go ahead and paint this onto the forehead. So as you see, as I'm moving my brush around, the targeted area moves along with my brush. So I'm actually painting with wherever the targeted area is. Now this is not going to replace the pixels. When I release my mouse, eventually it's going to try to blend it in. So let's just say that this is what I want to do here, and then I'm going to release my mouse. Okay, so you can see it kind of tried to blend in the skin tones, and the eyeball area is not, as distinct. There's a little bit of blending going in. But that is how the tool works, and that looks really bad, so I'm just going to undo that. But you need to be mindful at all times where your targeted area is, so that you don't travel off of the targeted area into something that you don't want to use. So you can see by using this technique, I'm able to get a much smoother skin tone because I have chosen exactly which area of skin to use. So I'm going to go ahead and try to do, well, actually you could just practice that on your own. I had this little mistake over here that I did on purpose. And the goal in this is just to practice. When you're done, it probably won't look perfect, but we're just learning, so just try your best. All right, so let's see what's on for the next tool. We have the patch tool. So this tool is it works similar to a lasso tool. So I'm going to try to remove this nose ring here. Go ahead and just draw around. So this is freehand, just trying to draw around an object. When you're done, it becomes a selection. And then what you'll want to do is move this. So I'm grabbing inside my selection, and then I'm moving it to a different tone, like a different skin source. It's going to, when I release, remove it and replace it. So it's not exact. So this probably wouldn't work because there's a nostril here that I wanted to retain, obviously. So let me go ahead and deselect. So you can see there's a little detail that's missing there. So I could go back and just do the top half if I wanted to. Try to remove just this part. And then go in here and remove this part and see what happens. And let me go ahead and deselect that. That's a little more natural looking, but there's several ways you could get rid of that, even using the tools that we just on the other two tools. You could probably get away with using one of these, probably the healing brush tool. But the patch tool is a quick way to replace something that you want to get rid of. The next is the content aware move tool. Now what this does is it takes something in the image and cuts it out. Let's say I want to remove this, and I don't know where I want to place it, but let's just go ahead and say I want to move it up on the ear somewhere. So what it's going to do is remove it from the original spot. It should have replaced it. There we go. You have to click to apply. So it tries to remove what I selected and then transfer it over to where I want to place it. So it's like it's a cut and replace. Cut and replace and then move it. So it does two functions. It gets rid of the original and moves it to a new location. I don't know how you would use this in a portrait, probably wouldn't, but in this tool set, I just wanted to bring your attention to that because it can be useful in other images where you want to move something from one place to another. And the last tool is used to paint out red eye, so it identifies there's no red eye in this, so this tool won't make very much sense. But if you do have an image that has red eye, you would use this as a brush tool to remove the red eye. So that's it in this tool list. So those are the techniques with the tools that we went over in class. Now I just want to talk about a couple other things that we did in class, some editing techniques. First, we're going to use the lasso tool and select the teeth. So I'm going to go ahead and just try my best to draw around the teeth here. It's okay if you get a little bit of gums and lips in there. And then the next thing we're going to do is apply what in Photoshop would be called an adjustment layer. But in here, this is a vector mask. Oh, it says adjustment layer. So when you click on it, if I scroll over, yeah, adjustment layer. Okay. We want to add in a hue saturation adjustment layer. And we're going to be targeting yellows. So the goal of this is to remove any yellowing of the teeth. So I'm going to focus on yellows again. So if I have anything, pink selected in the gums or anything like that, it's not going to affect that. So I'm focusing on yellows, and I'm first just going to oversaturate it to see what it is I'm focusing on here. So these are the tones that this is targeting. And what I want to simply do here is desaturate. So I'm going to go ahead and take any of that yellow out of the teeth. Now there wasn't a ton of obvious yellowing to the teeth, so it's not a drastic edit, but it is an easy thing to do. And on some other images, it could really make a difference. The other thing that we did in class is to enhance the redness of the lips. So for this, I'm going to really quickly just make a selection with the lasso tool on some of the lips here. Let's just do the upper lip. I'm doing this messy on purpose. And then I'm going to just create another hue saturation adjustment layer. And this time I'm going to focus on reds. I'm going to change that to red. And I'm going to increase the saturation so I can see like 100%, so I can see where it is I am applying this effect. Now, having created a adjustment layer, there's always going to be a mask because this is an effect that you want to have on your image. So what I had selected is shown in white in the mask, and everything else is black. So if I want to add or remove this same effect, I simply need to paint with white or black to add or remove. So I'm going to zoom in here. And over here, where you set your foreground and background color, there's a little button to reset it to the default. For some reason it's not. Oh yeah, there we go. So we have a white foreground on a black background, and then there's a reverse button here that reverses, so you can paint with white or black. So that's very useful for this effect. So let's go ahead and start with painting with black. Black will remove any effect that I've applied here. So it's going to remove it from the mask there. And again, this is a brush tool, so you want to check your hardness if you want your edge to be a little bit blended. I'm going to use a little softer brush. So that's to remove, and then to add, I would simply reverse the color scheme and paint with white. So I'm going to paint in a little more. So, and then the bracket keys on your keyboard is a shortcut to the left bracket makes the brush smaller, and the right bracket increases the size. So this is where I'm adding white to the mask, which means the effect is going to be applied there. It looks like I have a section up here that's not very visible, but because it doesn't have a lot of red tones, but it's still having an effect, so I'm going to go ahead and paint that out with black. So again, switching from black to white, back and forth, you're going to be adding or removing. It helps to start off with a better selection, but I did it very quickly. But this just shows you, even after the fact, you can go back in and add or remove. So this is just enhancing the natural tone of the lips, and you can see that it's really drastic. I'll go ahead and zoom out. So what you could do from this point is adjust the setting, so you turn the saturation back down to something that's reasonable. So you're just kind of bumping it up a little bit. And then the other thing you could do to affect the intensity is change the opacity of the layer itself, so that in essence blends the effect with the original. I'm going to leave it there. So I only did the top lip, but you could practice doing the top and the bottom. And then let's focus on the eyes for a second. There are two things generally that I do with the eyes. One would be increasing the saturation of the colors. So you could add a hue saturation layer, but there's also another tool that you can use. We're going to use, found where the dodge tool is. So go ahead and find that. It looks like a lollipop. And then at the bottom there's a sponge tool. So the dodge tool, let me just explain these three options. The dodge tool adds light, artificial light, into an image wherever you click. And the exposure is the amount of light. So I'm going to go ahead and reduce this a lot. So I recommend starting with a lower exposure. You can always layer up. Oh, I'm on a hue saturation there. Got to go back to the original. You can layer up this effect. So in this darker area, multiple brush strokes will introduce like an artificial lightning. So let's try to mimic light as you paint it in. So that's that tool. The dodge tool, that's the dodge tool. The burn tool is the opposite. It creates shadows. So I'm just going to go on purpose, just kind of create a darker area here. There's no reason for me to do this, I'm just doing it to show you. But there you've created a nice shiner for this lady. And then the last tool there is the sponge tool. This is the one that you can use to either saturate or desaturate an area in the image using your brush. So I'm going to choose saturate, and then the flow percentage is how intense the saturation happens. I'm just going to leave it at 100%. And as you paint it in, you can see the color vibrance increases. So if you layer on multiple brush strokes, it becomes even more colorful. So you don't want to overdo it to where it looks fake, but just a little bit extra saturation. This is obviously too much. I just did it on purpose to show you how the tool works, but You just want to kind of bump up the saturation to increase that color. And the other thing you could do is select the whites of the eyes. So when you're using the lasso tool, make sure that you are in the Unite option at the top so you can do multiple selections. I'm going to go ahead and select the whites of the eyes here. Again, this could be used, you'll see in a minute, we'll apply an adjustment layer, and then you could use the brush tool to brush in areas. But I'm going to start off with the lasso tool. So I'm just selecting the whites of the eyes. And I'm going to find the adjustment layer that is curves. And I'm going to use this to increase the brightness of the whites of the eyes. So if you click anywhere along the curve and drag up, you can see it becomes highlighted. So it's increasing the lightness. Go ahead and get out of the properties so you can see the effect. So this is in essence what we're trying to do, but it's obviously a little bit intense. I'm going to zoom out, and then I'm going to use the opacity to kind of blend it in with the original so it looks a little bit more natural. And then you can always turn off and on the eyeball to see the before and after, to see if you like the effect that you just applied, or if it's too intense or not intense enough. You can go back in and adjust. Alright, so the final thing that we did in class is applying a smoothing to the skin. So you'll see this a lot in photo filters on popular social media. It just applies a blurring to the skin to make you look younger. It just evens out your skin tones. So we're going to attempt to do that on this. So first thing you want to do is we're going to select just the skin tones in the image. So I'm going to go back to the layer with it where the image actually is. And I'm going to use a select option at the top to select a color range. Now in Photoshop, this is such a popular thing to do. There's a skin tones option here, but there isn't. So we have shadows, highlights, midtones. But we want to use it in the sampled colors option. So we're going to now just, on our image, select a skin tone. So I'm going to click here on the forehead. You can see those areas with that same skin tone have turned lighter. Now I want to add more skin tones. Eventually I want most of the face and the neck to be white. So I'm going to add, click the plus so any additional skin tones will be added. So I'm going to go ahead and just click around to make sure I have enough skin tones selected. There's some here on the cheek that are not, so I'm going to click there. So you can see I'm getting actually most of the image selected. And then I'm going to press OK. So those are all the areas with the skin tone. And what I'm going to do, I wanted to duplicate this first, but I'll go ahead and duplicate this now, Control J, and hide the other layers so you can see what we have here. So what I've duplicated are all the skin tones. But there are lots of areas here that I don't want to blur. So you can use the eraser because these are actual pixels. There's an eraser somewhere around here, right here. I should have made this a new layer and created a mask because that will be the most editable. I'm just going to go in here and remove anything that I don't want to blur. So I actually selected way too much in the skin tone area. But her hair and her skin tone are similar. So in this particular image, it may have just been easier to make a selection of the face and the skin tones, but I wanted to show you that method of selecting. So just going to go ahead and remove this here. And then I want to remove anything that I don't want to blur. So I don't want to blur anything in the mouth. So I just want to focus on the skin. And the eyebrow area, I want to retain any details there. Okay. Because this is not a mask, I actually just deleted all of those pixels. So it's not the best way to do this, but I have seen it done this way. So from here, what you want to do is apply a blur to this layer. And the blurs are found in the filter tab at the top. Scroll down to blur. I like to use surface blur because it gives you some settings that you can change. But I do recommend, because this is an online editing tool, this requires a lot of processing power. Just don't make a lot of adjustments that can really cause your browser to freeze up, and then you'll probably lose your work. So I'm just going to leave it at the default and press OK. And I'm going to zoom in here, and you can see how this has really smoothed out the skin. Almost gives it a plasticky look. So let me go ahead and reveal the layer below so you can see this applied to the actual image. And then I'll go ahead and hide the blur layer so you can see the original, and then with the blur on. So a lot of times this effect is way too aggressive. So from this point, what I would do is lower the opacity of the blur layer to show some of the original underneath. So there is a blurring effect, but it's not super obvious. So I'll go ahead and show you. This is the after effect. This is the before, after, before, and after. All right, so those are the main techniques that we focused on in class. What I like to do after I'm done is, if you hold down the Alt key and click on the eyeball for the original background, it will hide all of the layers above it. So it's hiding all of our edits. So that's the before, and then you can Alt click the eyeball again to reveal and see the results. Now, of course, I have this weird thing going on with the earring, and I have the nice black eye there. But other than that, you're looking for, did I improve this image or not? Do I need to adjust anything? Do I need to start over? So that's why we keep the original. So my encouragement to you is to practice those tools. We went over, there's another image that you could practice on in Google Classroom. There's an image you could use to practice. But we'll go over this and review it in class next time we're together for your next assignment. That's it.